We'll get started in just about a minute. I've got 5:29. Hopefully everybody's somewhere dry. Wow, it's really getting windy and rainy. I think the rain is sideways outside the district office right now. So hopefully everybody's safe. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Appreciate everybody joining us. Got about 63, some other people still joining. We're going to set aside 45 minutes for tonight. And the format is really going to be walking through a little presentation, which will be available on our website probably tomorrow, but it will be available for the public. So if I go through some slides and don't spend a lot of time on some of the details, know that you'll have access to it tomorrow if you want to go through in more depth. But with that, we'll go ahead and jump in and get my share going. Okay, I'm hoping everyone can see this first slide. Oops, the second slide, there we go. Okay, so really our purpose tonight is to talk and share some feedback from the surveys we've had around learning during a pandemic. It's really, you are an important part of the feedback loop. We're really talking to parents. I know there's some probably staff on this call also, but the focus tonight is parents. And you've given us a lot of feedback. You are part of a 3-phase of feedback, 1 being students, 2 being you as parents, and 3 being our staff. And that's been a lot of work over the past few days to get that input. And we're still going through some of the details, but I can give you some good feedback at a high level of what you've told us, as well as the other 2 groups, students and staff. The mindset, I want to start with this slide, and I think this is the most important slide. It kind of level sets how we talk with each other. I firmly believe what I put on this slide, and I'll read it to everyone. I firmly believe there are good, well-intentioned, thoughtful people who have very different views on how to deal with the current pandemic. I believe that to be true. I think if you've talked to anyone, if you've read anything, you will probably agree that having a very different opinion on how to approach this doesn't make one person good or bad. I'm on a Zoom. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Okay. 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 You guys can hear me? All right. Let's see. I want to know, can one of my principals call me and tell me where we're at? Okay. No, forget it. We're good. Okay. So I don't know if you could hear what I was doing, but there's nothing more frustrating than being really prepared for a Zoom and having the power go out at the district office. And we've got people at the other end of the building. And so if you heard me scream, we're on a Zoom, and the power goes off, that was me. So get a chuckle out of that. Let's get back to the presentation. I think we're still recording. I think we're still on. We lost everything on our end though. Let me reset. We adapt, right? We're flexible. We can do this. What I need to know is, let's see, if I exit that, I need one of my principals who's probably on this to text me and let me know when I go to, or share this, or somebody just text me, or no, don't text me, put in the chat if somebody put in there, can you see this presentation? I'm going to go ahead and try to reset. Okay. All right, let's reshare them. Let's do this again. And hope the power stays on. District office is notorious for losing power. Okay, where we were was this important slide. I read the first part for those of you who are just joining us. I think we have to have these conversations. I don't think, I believe we have to have conversations like this with a true understanding that there are good, well-intentioned, thoughtful people. We're not going to demonize one mindset or another, who have very different views on how to deal with the current pandemic. Just because we have different views on things doesn't mean somebody's smarter, better, nicer, none of that. It just means we're seen as different. And we are, unfortunately, bombarded with a lot of different information. And it's very difficult to know what's accurate, what's right. Let's take another assumption. I'm assuming positive intent. When I talk with people, I assume that whether it's coming out in a positive way, we both have a focus on what's best for our students, what's best for our staff, and what's best for our families. So I just wanted to share that. Let's assume positive intent. And finally, I've said this from the beginning, I believe it in my heart of hearts. As we go through this unprecedented time, and I know people are sick of hearing it, it's an unprecedented challenge. I don't know what else to call it. I believe the decisions we make, how we work with each other, how we listen with each other, how we plan and adapt, yep, we keep adapting, will make us stronger as a learning community at the end. There will be an end. We'll get past this. We don't know exactly when, but we need to be stronger as a result, not weaker. So that being said, some of these slides have been shown before, so I'm going to go through quickly. Like I said earlier, this presentation will be posted on the website tomorrow. So I won't spend time on all of this. Let's see, I will highlight new things. I do want to point out IDPH kind of played a game in the past week or two, and they changed the outbreak numbers from 2 to 5. So I'm not going to get into details of the politics around that. All I'm going to say is that we are maintaining, based on the Will County Health Department advice, the same procedures for an outbreak of 2 individuals in a classroom. And we're not going to wait until it gets to 5 like the IDPH is suggesting. I'm not going to get into why they made that decision or anything else, but from my understanding from the Will County Health Department, it was not a medical decision. It was a different type of a decision. So we are going to continue to protect folks and follow those procedures. So there's information about what an outbreak is. This is not new information. I'm not going to go through this. Just so you know, this is something I think I talked with all of our parents about back on October 15th. It's changed once or twice since then, at least one time since then. This is the October 27th version. So if you're looking at this chart, there are probably 4 or 5 iterations of this. So if you get online and you're looking at things, please always make sure you look at the October 27th version. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, it says revised 1027. So we're not going to go through that. Not going to go through the phases. These external concerns beyond our control remain. So our issues around staffing are to a large part related to a sub-teacher shortage. If there was an unlimited number of subs, we could maybe do some things differently, but that's not the case for any school district. Staffing is a concern. The trends are, we know, going in the wrong direction. I have some slides for that. And we continue to do our contact tracing and mitigation efforts that go into place. All our staff knows this. I want to share these next 2 slides with parents so you know how serious we are, that when we're in person or even when we're not in person, that we have metrics internally that we've established that we're following to make sure that we're being safe. And if we see the metrics go the wrong direction internally, we make adjustments. So these metrics we have 100% control over. to a large extent, we have 100% control. These are KPIs, key performance indicators, and you can see how I'm not going to get into, I'm not going to go through these, but I want you to know that we track things like social distancing. And what we've been doing is every week until this past week, we've been asking our staff, are we meeting or not meeting your expectations for social distancing? Simple question, yes or no. Are people wearing their masks the way they should in school? Do they have the right access to hand washing? Do they take their temperature the right way? Are they self-certifying the right way? That little golden ticket thing for students, and staff does that as well. Is there the right amount of availability of PPE and cleaning supplies? There's 11 indicators altogether. The last ones are, what is your observation of the SEL well-being, social emotional learning well-being of students, so staff? How engaged are students in person? How engaged are students remotely? And then is the number of visitors to the nurse's office a problem or not? So those are I just want to share that because we're very serious about the safety measures that we've put in place from day one. And it doesn't help to put them in place and not monitor them. So we monitor and we make adjustments if they aren't doing what we think they need to do. I am not going to go into detail over this information. If you want to dig into the data around metrics at the state, county, and even our local Lockport, Homer Glen level, get on to the website that's listed here. It's the Will County Health Department. This is all information as of today. It tells us what we already know. I'm not going to belabor the point. We are, as a South suburban area, higher than the state, and Will is higher than Kankakee. There's a lot more data we could drill down to. That's not the point of today. This chart compares our Northern Will region. We are in the Northern Will region, so you got to pay attention when you're in this website to which region you're talking about. And then finally, this isolates us as Homer Glen and Lockport. So once again, the only point of this is trend lines. This is a chart I do want to spend some time on. If you haven't looked at this, it's a little bit different. I've changed some colors around to help with communication. One thing that we are doing is we'll talk more about the 10% or greater, but any given day that that we have less than 5% of our students and staff at quarantine or isolation if they are positive, that's a white day. We want to be above 95%. If we're 5% or greater, it's orange. That's a concern, and it's a different concern for students versus staff. 5% of students, and this is district-wide, this is not broken down per school. We will be doing that eventually, but we haven't broken it down to that level on a day-to-day basis yet. But what I was saying is that 5% of more than 5% of students being out, we can still have school. When you're at 5% or more of staff, it really depends on what staff we're talking about. Some staff, classroom teacher, if all of those that are out are classroom teachers and we don't have enough subs, we can't have in-person learning. So the numbers matter differently for the staff because how we get subs and who we can fill in for food service versus an administrative assistant versus a custodian versus a teacher versus a parapro. So there isn't one easy number to give when you're talking about the staff. So that orange is worrisome when it's staff. It's worrisome when it's students too, but it doesn't mean we have to go to full remote. 10% or greater is a threshold that we've hit at one of our schools. We've been close at the other two, too close. And that's what I want to talk about. So there's a lot of people who like to say, staff, parents, and I get it, I'm not criticizing anyone, but it's easy to say all this back and forth, we're flying by the seat of our pants. We don't know what we're doing. I'd push back on that a little bit. I don't think that's an accurate statement to make. Let me, show you how we got to where we are. I've added a line that if you look at the bottom, I didn't mean to switch that. It says remote. So if you look all the way at the second row down, and it's starting back to September 21st, we've been tracking this all the way back since August. But This chart shows September 21st. You go through and you can see if you move to September 30th, that's when our Walsh students came back. And that's why down below it says hybrid. Okay, we're back to in person at that point. Then on that Friday, on October 2nd, we brought back the other K-5 grade levels, Reed and Ludwig. Then we brought back the junior high the following Monday and Tuesday, and we were hybrid. Not a lot of hybrid days. We're not happy about that, right? We want to be more hybrid. Um, you can see where it got to on, look at the jumps. When we go from October 5th, 11 students total that were isolated. Then you jump up to 30, 36, 41, 45, 40. And then look what happened on the 13th. This was a Tuesday of that week. We doubled again to 83, from 40 to 83, then to 94, then to 96. That day we hit 96 is the same day we had an outbreak in a classroom. So we had to quarantine that classroom. That was a given. But then in talking to the health department and looking at our school-wide percentages, that's where we got the problem with 10%. And in talking to the health department, when you're at 10%, you need to be considering closing down the whole school. So in talking with them, when we looked then at the percentages of the other schools, we were at 8, 8.5, 10 at all of our K-5s. Oak Prairie was different, but it became a very clear decision that this isn't the path we can continue on. And the question would be, how many days are we putting people at risk when we're at this level? So is anyone happy that you had less than 24 hours to make that determination? No. We learned a lesson there. We learned that looking at that metric was very important. Prior to that week, we had never been told to look at that metric. It was not a thing that was on our radar. Now it is. So we're looking at that number differently. That's part of going through this the first time in our lives. So yes, it's very unfortunate and bad that you had less than 24 hours notice. Teachers aren't happy about that, and parents aren't happy about that, and I bet students aren't happy about that. I don't think that'll happen again. We want to be more mindful going forward. So you can look at our numbers, you go up to the next row, and even in remote, you can see our staff numbers. I really want to point you to mid-October staff numbers being below 95%. That's a tough one to come back to. Now you see starting November 2nd, earlier last week, numbers were looking better for staff. They jump back up and they jump up, and then a couple more positive, and then we get back into the orange. This is where it gets tricky. What I can tell you is you can look at the student numbers and say, those look pretty good. I think all of us would say thank you to the parents who are calling in their students this whole time during remote instruction and saying, my son or daughter has symptoms, we're tracking them, they're quarantined. We really appreciate that transparency from parents. I bet any of us would probably guess that probably isn't a realistic picture of all of our student reality. So there's a problem. Do we really know how many students have symptoms or are positive? Hopefully, that, if you're not getting tested, you don't know if you're positive. So that's kind of a head scratcher. What do we do about that? I don't know. Staff we're tracking, our staff have been communicating and telling us where we're going. So the reason I show this is to give a little bit of the story of how we got here. It answers some questions about how are we making decisions. I will say, and it'll come up later in the meeting too, the districts that set one hard, fast criteria, we're going to only go remote if X happens, they're really regretting to some extent that decision. I think making that call of a metric way back in July or even August, and then not knowing the reality of what we're going through now can be very challenging. The other, so I will stand behind our constant looking at what is safe. What data do we have at our fingertips that tells us we should go hybrid in person or we should go remote? Not an easy call, but we're always looking for better information. I do want to say throughout this entire process, especially when you saw those numbers jumping to the quarantines, I said this at the October 15th meeting with parents, it bears reiterating. Our nurses have never wavered from the process they use. It's not like they changed their criteria along the way and all of a sudden we went from 40 to 83. Our nurses have used the exact same criteria from day one and applied it the same way. So I can say with certainty these numbers are real with quarantine and symptoms. Remember, we're not saying all these students have COVID, but they have symptoms. We want those to get tested, checked out by a doctor, and then back in school in a day or two. That's what wasn't happening before. When we go back to in person, we want that to happen. Okay, we surveyed students. There's the majority of this feedback that I'm going to share with you is students. We have some parent and we have some staff feedback also. But we really wanted to focus in on how are our students doing right now. So we had, I think the next slide has it, 670 students, almost all of our junior high, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and then a large number of our 4th and 5th graders. And I think even a 3rd grade class got in there. But it's just hard to give a survey to the younger students in a remote environment. We would have loved to have gotten survey results from everybody. But I think this is an important slide. And it tells us, it affirms what we were worried about, what you are already seeing as parents. I feel safe. That's stacked the right way, but you've got most of the kids saying usually or often, but man, it's not okay to have those kids saying not much or not at all. Now, if we gave the same survey in a normal year without COVID, we would still have some not much and not at all. So we're not going to overreact, but we certainly are going to key in to who these students are. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. I feel connected with others. Gosh, we wish that was turned the other way. Okay, so not the same connection. I feel scared. That's stacked the right way, but man, we sure don't want to see that usually, that blue, even though it's small, we don't want to see that on there, or even the red for often. I feel happy. Man, we wish that blue and that red was a lot higher. So we're focused on that. We need more students, if not all, to be sometimes, often, or most. Sometimes I would argue isn't good enough. I feel sad. Once again, some stacking the right way, but not exactly the way we'd love to see it. I feel listened to. This is all information the teachers will have, principals have the raw data. We're focused on this. And then I feel bored. Interesting during a pandemic and what kids are occupying their times with. So we're keyed in on that. There is a question that I'll show you in a minute at the end of the survey where they were able to say, do you want a teacher or a social worker to follow up with you? Just a simple yes or no, or maybe. And all of our principals have those results, 2nd grade through 5th grade through 8th grade. And we are in the process, if we haven't already, we're in the process of following up with every single student who said yes or maybe to, do you want a teacher or a social worker to follow up with you? So we are very keyed into our students' needs, down to the individual. Okay, this is a question I asked every group, students, parents, and staff. So I'll keep track of these percentages for you, but you might want to jot these down at home. So we'll round up. 63% of our students said, given the safety measures in place, do you feel comfortable returning to school for in-person learning? 63% said yes, 17% said no, and 20% were just not sure. Okay. Whoops. What's the best way for you to learn? 51% of the students say, I learn better when I'm in person. You would have thought that could have been higher, but look at full remote. 13.6, 14% of the kids said they learn better in full remote. That's something we're going to have to analyze as educators and think about, how are we connecting with those kids when we're in person? And then this lovely group of 23% that they're good either way, that they can do remote, they can do in person, they're fine. And the other one that just, I'm not sure how I learn best, and kind of typical of a student, I'm not sure how we would answer that as an adult. Do you enjoy learning remotely? Yes, absolutely, 22%. Yeah, but I'd like to see a few things change, 33%. So once again, that's over half of the students say they enjoy it, even though half said they learn better in person. Half said that they do enjoy it to a fair degree. Then there were about 43%, 44% that said either no, There's quite a few challenges, or that 22%, not at all, not good for me at all. So we hear that, and we're responding to that as best we can. How often do you feel engaged? Your blues, 20% usually. Your reds, 32% often. Sometimes, 29%, and then none of the time. Okay, so we're going to talk tonight about things that we are already putting in motion for those students who are telling us not much and none of the time. We're not overlooking those students. It's the end of the first trimester, and we are really targeting those students who are not engaged. Beginning to. We're not there yet, but we're beginning to, in different ways. We asked some questions. I'm not going to go into all this about how much time they spend during synchronous remote learning, and then how much time they spend on asynchronous learning. And then this is the question I mentioned earlier, and we are following up with every individual student who answered yes or maybe to this question. Parent survey, similar questions. We try to have some overlap so we can compare groups. We asked you how you describe the emotional well-being of your children. This is an important one, so you can review this information on your own when it's up there. Do you feel comfortable sending your children back to school given the community spread, given the numbers? 53%, when I asked the question this way, said yes. 33% said no. If I change the question a little bit, and I did this for staff and students, this is the way it was worded for staff, students, and parents. With all the safety protocols we have in place, do you support returning to hybrid even? So that's the same question. The only difference is we remind people on the front end, we have a lot of safety protocols in place. That changed a little bit. Parents, that went up to 58, 59% if you round. Down a little bit to no. They were down to 27%, and then 15% unsure. Very similar question to this one. Similar answers, just interesting. I'm not going to go through these. These are a little bit hard to read and get into, but I want you to know as parents that we as a staff are going to dissect this as far as what went well during remote learning, what was more challenging during remote learning. So although we're not going to go through all that today, that's the stuff that's more appropriate for individual school teams to really drill down. Thoughts on returning to hybrid in person. I put a foil in this question. I don't normally do this, but if you look at the purples, that was the choice that is not really an option. But to be fair to a Likert scale question that has extremes on both ends, the far end extreme would be this purple 19% that the question was, or the way it was phrased is return to full-time, in-person, full day, no safety measures, just like we were before COVID. So I will tell you, even though we asked that question, that's not an option. But it's fair to ask people, is that where your mind is? And we asked that, and 19% said, yeah, that's what I think should happen. Okay, so fair enough. Remember the first slide. This isn't a judgment. This is just the reality that we are in. The red is a smaller percent. That was, well, let's keep going with the green. Green was, regardless of what's happening with community spread, return on November 30th. That's 13%. Regardless on community spread, return next Monday, the 16th. That was 18%. So you would think that all of those grouped together are saying, get us back no later than the November 30th. I hear you. Not going to make any promises on what we do, but I hear and honor those responses. There were a number that we said, what if we reviewed the models and maybe adjusted and then came back? That's the red. And then 34% said, you know what, we need to maintain until community spread is going the right direction. So you're starting to see kind of some patterns here a little bit. Now the teacher survey. And once again, I know there are a lot of open-ended questions that we asked. We're getting to those where we aren't ignoring that part of it, for teachers and for parents. Teacher survey. We asked teachers what percent of your students are adequately engaged. I don't know if I would say that 75% or higher is adequate, but if you look at the 75, the 85, and the 95% responses, that gets you to about half. About half the teachers said students were somewhere between 75 and higher engaged. Now, I do want to call out that, we are very focused on those red 0 to 25% students, or those kids are less than 50, and I'm even going to argue 50 to 75 isn't good enough. So we are making plans to address that. Thoughts on returning to hybrid in person. Once again, it's about 50% of teachers, of staff, this isn't just teachers, this is staff, said, wait till things turn around in the community numbers. And you can kind of read the rest from there. This will be available tomorrow. This document will link to tomorrow if you click on here to the FAQ. So one of the questions in the parent and the teacher survey was, are there any questions you would like me to answer tonight during the parent Zoom? I asked teachers that, and I asked parents that. And so here's what this document is. We created one back for the fall. This is some of those responses, but we've also got a big chunk that are directly from the teacher and parent surveys. And I haven't edited this other than to kind of summarize. We had, I think it was 600-ish responses altogether. You can imagine how many questions that resulted in. So I combed through them and created, if there's a repetition, I tried to find questions that represented something that was repeated. So I'm not going to go into this parent choice piece. This is not really very new news here. I do want to spend some time on this section. These are more, the first ones are more of a traditional Q&A. This, the way I'm going to handle these is I've literally cut and pasted questions from parents and teachers, and I've clustered them around topics. I'm going to read these, and I'm going to give you a response that's overall to that topic. We will spend a few minutes at the end, and maybe not much, if you want to put a question in the chat room that I don't address. So don't put it in yet, because I might address it. Learning loss. This certainly aren't the only 3 questions we have, but I want to read them to acknowledge we are very aware and concerned about this. So here's the types of questions that were revolved around learning loss. How will our children catch up academically? How is the school district going to make sure students are prepared for the next grade level when the current school year has been so limited and erratic? I understand wanting students back in buildings, but they receive so much less instruction with the hybrid model. So shouldn't the focus be on the amount of instruction our students are receiving and not where they receive it? That's very interesting. My response to all of those are, that's exactly our concern for the learning loss has been there from day one. It's exactly why we're spending from last week until today to really figure out what changes do we need to make. If we are in bad community spread numbers for the long haul, what changes do we need to make for safety? What changes do we need to make for better remote learning? And what changes do we need to make if we stay remote learning to really target specific students who just are not going to get it out of this process? They are not going to respond to remote learning for whatever reason. It could be what's going on in the home. It could be too many computers. We've taken care of the connectivity for the most part. There's a variety of reasons. It could be their learning style. It could be how they're wired as a learner. There are a lot of reasons that we need to hone in on some students. If you ask me the percent, depending on which group I'm looking at, it looks like it's between 10 and 20% of our kids. That's how serious it is. And we are looking at those as individual students. We're also looking at the needs of each individual student. Questions around community spread. I'll just read these. Why is it the kids can't come back to school, but pumpkin patches can be open? How can we limit spread within the community? Our students may not initially be exposed to the virus at school, but they will spread the virus at school. Students are going to Wisconsin Dells water parks, Indiana Dunes, sleepovers, trampoline parties, etc. Why are we going to a hybrid in-person model when the numbers in the community are climbing? And can we get a list of testing sites in our area that parents can get the correct test? We actually put that up on the website today. We just, one of our nurses, Patty McGuire, who's our head COVID clerk, I think found that, and I believe that's up on our COVID website today. So my overall answer to that is this is a tough one. This is why we're struggling with this, because I always talk about what do we have control over? We have control over our schools to some extent. We can put the safe practices in place. From what we know, Kids aren't going to spread in school if we're following all the protocols. But there's always going to be something that gets through. And the more community spread there is, the more likelihood that more gets through at school. That's the unsafe part of it that we're really struggling with. So it's a problem. We're going to have to address that. And it's not us. It's not just Lockport. It's not just Homer Glen. It's not just Will County. This is everybody. So how are we dealing with this? It's a problem. Other learning models and outbreak data. That's how I've entitled this section. Let me read these. There's several here. Why is it that other school districts and private schools are able to provide safe in-person learning, yet District 92 is unable to provide in-person learning for our children? Why is D92 backing off its hybrid learning plan when Lockport High School District 205 seems to be successfully navigating the pandemic with its hybrid learning plan? I'm going to address both of those right now. I have parents email me all the time. They say, this is ridiculous. We should be in person. Lamont is in session, Lamont 113A. A parent emailed me that recently. They weren't. I know these other districts, and Lamont isn't and wasn't at the time in person. Lockport is out. People use District 91. They're out. Districts are all over the place. But what we're seeing that I am bothered by, because this is our sense of urgency, is a huge trend towards school districts saying, we're just going to go full remote, and we're talking January. We're not talking November 30th. I know that's not what everybody wants to hear, but I also want to point out, when you look at private schools, I am not being pro private school. I'm not being anti private school, but that is not an accurate statement to say that private schools are able to provide safe in-person learning. When you look at the data from the state with outbreaks, the data would speak differently. And that's all I'm going to say, because I'm not here to promote one over the other. I understand that other schools have a lot looser restrictions and aren't following all the guidelines. I am not here to judge any other school district, period. Hard stop. But I think there's deeper dig you have to do into the data before you say they're doing it safer. Will the 10% threshold still apply no matter the model? So far, yes, is the answer to that. So the longer one. As stated at the beginning of this survey, the district wishes to start in-person learning as soon as possible. I understand the SEL benefits for our students. However, the health risk seems to outweigh the SEL benefits. The IDPH metrics for school determination of community spread states that positivity should be less than or equal to 5%. As of Sunday, this person was talking about 2 days ago, the rate in Will County is 13.1%. That's higher now. As the new cases per 100,000 should be less than 50. We are at 332. I know all this. So how is it safe to return to in-person learning? My response to those type of questions is, if we are perfect in the schools with all of our safety protocols, until the health department says, and other counties have done that. Other counties have said all the schools in our county should shut down. Will County Health Department has not said that, and I don't have any indication that they're going to. So they are still going to ask us to take it to district by district basis, which gets messy, right? Okay. If as a community we're trending in the wrong direction, as well as allergy and flu season, what numbers are we looking at and how we're going to make the decisions? I think I've answered the numbers question already in the chart we showed earlier. If we're stuck in a pattern of remote, our plans being put in place to start thinking of creative ways to help these kids social emotionally and feel a connection to their students, I would say a resounding heck yes. We had an hour and a half teacher meeting yesterday, just focused on that topic. And after today's meeting with parents, we have a follow-up teacher meeting tomorrow. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to figure out how to connect with those kids. Will you please consider going back to the 8 to 2 schedule for Oak Prairie, where the classes are had every day? Just for the Oak Prairie families out there, I know Mrs. Forecash has communicated that. They've looked at that in depth. And I know on its face, logically, that makes sense. But they were seeing a big drop in engagement levels when they were going full day. They really lost kids after lunch, and those class periods were shorter. They're seeing more engagement under longer class periods, even though they don't see the same students every day, and not losing them after lunch. They're getting more before lunch than they were when we had after lunch, and then too many kids weren't re-engaging at that point. So that's some of the rationale around that. What is preventing the school from increasing hours of remote learning? How many hours can our students look at it? I'm here to tell you, kindergartners, first graders, a number of our other students in all grade levels are struggling tremendously looking at a computer screen. We aren't designed to learn that way. The only reason we're going to learn that way is we have no other choice because of safety. Hard stop. We do not argue that this is great for kindergartners. This is great for kids. So increasing that time, although it makes sense, I don't know how many of our parents have to spend the majority of their day on Zoom. There's a lot of issues. That's not a panacea. There are problems with a long day of Zoom and engagement levels. So the learning theory we're operating under still is that we need to catch kids at their best in the mornings, engage them at the highest level possible during that time, target smaller groups in the afternoon, more engaging, but be very strategic about how we're using that time with them. Just more screen time on a Zoom is not what we're after. If there are districts that are doing that, I don't know of any evidence why that's better, is what I'll say to that. Is the risk of having to switch back again to remote if we come back in person worth it? That's an unanswered question for me. I know it's popular to say right now, teachers say it, parents say it, all this back and forth. We've only gone from remote to in person, back to remote. So yes, that is a back and forth, and we are looking to go back, but we don't know what that's going to look like yet. And so I would be careful to say, where's the model? Remember that person asked the question earlier, isn't it more important what we're doing when we're with the kids than where we're doing it? That's not the final answer, but it's something that makes you think. Whoops, sorry about that. Looking for my place. How is staff allowed to travel to hotspots on weekends? We kind of answered that earlier with some of the folks that we aren't at the point where we can control families, and we aren't at the point where we can control our staff. I put something in place over the summer that said if you're going to take vacation days to any vacation days, if my 12-month staff to any hotspots, you need to talk to me before you do it. Doesn't mean I had the ability to say that they weren't allowed to go, but I wanted that dialogue with our staff. So I do take that seriously. And I think it's irresponsible if people are traveling to hotspots. It's not helping us. There's no evidence that helps. I get that we want to get away, but there's consequences. I'm limited in that I can't tell parents where to go, and I can't tell staff where to go. Why not stay remote until January 2nd or after the holiday season? I understand. That's part of this extension we had was kids are going to have Halloween. The community numbers are going the wrong direction. There's going to be more spread. So we come back and we get everybody sick again. And then now we're going to come back after Thanksgiving. I understand it doesn't make sense. We aren't sure what the right answer is. We're still trying to figure that out. And that next question kind of goes after it also. And that's it. Those are the types of questions. Now, there were certainly other questions that were mean-spirited. I read them. I read your questions. There were things that were digs. There were things that weren't healthy. And if it made somebody feel better for venting, I'm happy that you got something off your chest. But no hard feelings. It's a very stressful time. And so what we're trying to do is focus on what questions are going to help us move forward. With that, I'm going to stop the share. It's the end of my talking. If there's a key question, I'm going to give it, I'll say 5 more minutes. I should have stopped at 6:15. We've got 2 minutes. I'll go to 6:20, 7 minutes. If you have a question I did not address, go ahead and put it in the chat, and I'll do my best to address it before we wrap up. Got 119 people and nobody's got a follow-up question. I must have done a pretty good job preparing for this. Yeah, somebody said District 91 does half the alphabet. So the one that, so we didn't talk about the models too much, that AB. We really talked about that yesterday in the teacher meeting. And here's the problem with the AB. On those days, so that means your kids are only in school 2 days a week. And so my question to the group was, if we have to go full remote and our model is holding us back of a 5 day a week model, do we need to look at an AB model for K5? Do we need to look at an AB model where at least 2 days a week our students are in, and that's better than zero? And we've really talked that through, and we do not believe that's better for our students. You've got the issues with the live streaming and how that works or doesn't work. And you know, just for the record, D91 is not in person. They have called it at this point full remote. But that I just want you to hear that we are very humble about stealing other people's models. If there's a better model that's working differently for other districts, we want it. And so I scour for that. I'm always looking for, is there a better way? So here's what you can't do. You can't say, oh, these people are not doing a good job because they keep changing their mind. It's not that we're changing our mind. We're responding to the reality. And we're not going to keep doing the same thing and get bad results. We will continue to figure out a better way to do what we're doing in a time that there is no playbook. So school lunches, remainder of the year, I can't speak past December 31st. All the legislation that sets us up for anything expires December 31st. So that's federal legislation, FICRA law, some of it's state-based for the lunches and things like that. Although that's National School Lunch Program, that is federal. So we are waiting to see what gets extended beyond December 31st. If people are quarantined due to symptoms, okay, so let's talk about the quarantine really quick. If you're quarantined and you have symptoms, get a test. I had symptoms last Wednesday. I had symptoms. I went straight to a testing site. I stood in line. It's in Joliet, corner of Essington and Theodore. I stood in line. I waited. I got my test results, and then I had to quarantine Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I worked from home. By Saturday, I didn't go out. I didn't go anywhere. I got my results on Saturday. They gave me a choice on Wednesday. They said, do you want the 15-minute test or the one that takes longer to get back? And I said, I need the RT-PCR test. That's the only test that we can accept to get me back into work. And they said, okay, well, unfortunately, you have to wait 3 days for that. I said, I don't care. I need that test to get back. Saturday, got my results, negative, back at work on Monday. So there could be a site out there that gives you that RT-PCR test faster. But if you have those symptoms and you want to get your kids back in school, please, if your doctor won't do it, then find a testing site. They're out there. And you got to look a little bit hard. You got to kind of run around there. Look on the website. There's a list there now. But get your kids tested if you're comfortable with that and get them back in a day or two. That helps our quarantine numbers. That's what I told the parents on the October 15th meeting. Probably so upset at that point, you don't remember, but please get them tested. So it may be a day or two, but that's better than 10 or 14 days. So please use that testing as a mechanism to get them back in, if at all possible. I know there's a question about some very specific groups of students needing to get back in. I will say that, yes, we're aware that districts are looking at certain populations of students and trying to bring them back in. Here's who here's who we are focused on: those students who are not engaged. Yes, that could be a student with an IEP. Yes, that could be a student who just is disengaged without an IEP throughout the regular year in person. But we are very focused on those students who are just disengaged. So we're going to find ways to reach them. And I appreciate the question about what's being done for teachers. We do have an SEL task force. We are focused on that. What I continue to say is that we have some individual initiatives at different buildings, and it's the oxygen mask theory that when you go on a plane, They tell you if the oxygen mask drops down, you have to put it on yourself as an adult first before you take care of your small child next to you. You've got to be okay to take care of someone else. We preach that with our teachers. They've heard it from me, they've heard it from the principal, they're hearing it from each other. And we are putting some different programs in place. Some are related to mindfulness, some breathing exercises. And thanks to our OT folks for doing some of that. And then some individual kindness activities and different initiatives at the building level. We need our teachers. We love and care about our teachers. We love and care about our students, and we love and care about our families. And so it's a heavy lift to continue to focus on everybody, but that's why we're going to get through this in a better spot. We will be stronger at the end of this because of how we're working with each other throughout. Clubs and that kind of stuff, if you've got ideas of clubs and whatnot, I approve those way back. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if there's, I gave the green light back in September. If there's, I'm going to make one up, chess club or something like that. If there are ways to engage students that way, we are certainly open to it. And some of it may be happening that I just don't know about right now. But that is approved. I skimmed those. I'm sorry if I missed someone's question, but I do have to wrap it. Thank you. Hang in there. We will be giving an update. So what's happened? We got a lot of information over the weekend, a lot of input from you, from staff, and from students. We started to go through that yesterday. We've listened to teachers. Teachers want me to give all the answers. I keep telling them, no, we're doing this together. I've got my opinions. I've got my focus, and I get to share my opinion, but so do you, and so do you as a parent. So parents, if you send me a long email, that's not the best way. I'm open to phone calls. We might play phone tag a little bit. We'll schedule a time and we'll talk. But I want you to know that we are listening. I am reading all of your comments. I do pay attention. Sometimes there's only so many different ways I can say the same thing if everybody keeps asking me the same question. But we do understand a level of pressure that it looks very unwise to come back in person on November 30th, given what's going on in the community. But I am not going to predict today what we do. That's our target. Our target is to come back on November 30th. I can't tell you if that's going to happen or not. I don't know what the numbers will continue to do. I don't know what kind of plans we're going to come up with as staff to do what we do better. And that's our focus, our hard work right now that we're focused on. Okay, I got to go. If there's a couple questions I missed, feel free to reach out and we'll go from there. Thank you, you guys. I hope everybody did well in the storm tonight. Hope you didn't lose any trees. And I care about you guys. Take care of each other. Bye.